Uh, our theme this morning is about community and being connected and together. And I'd like to start with a very old illustration that I used a long, long time ago, but I thought it might be fun to do it again. A group of birds got together one day and decided to start a church. It's a group of birds. The parrot stood and said, if we're going to have a church, we've got to have organization. We need an administrative board, committees, subcommittees, and lots of them, and they got to meet a lot of times. The pheasant jumped up and said, I disagree. It's much more important to have lots of big social events. We all have beautiful feathers, and surely God meant for us to show them off. Yes, the most important thing in the church is lots of big, sparkling social events. The sparrow chimed in, nope, it's a popular minister, I'm sure. That's what we need. Doesn't matter what he says or does, so long as he doesn't make anyone mad. The starling shouted out, well, I think you're all wrong. Most important is to have a beautiful building. The goose spoke up, we need a lot of good music, a big praise band to raise the spirit. Next, the cardinal, who had just flown in from St. Louis, said, we need a baseball team. The most important thing of all is to have a good baseball team represent our church and the community. That's critical. But just then, the wise owl slowly stood to his feet. The wise owl spoke, saying, despair not, my friends, for we can have all these things. All we need is to be sincere, even when we don't mean it. So they formed the church, and surely when they got done, they indeed had a church for the birds. Thank you. Thank you for laughing, Ellen. Typically, a church is made up of an awful lot of parts. What was predominantly missing, I think, from the church for the birds was kind of an essential purpose. I guess traditionally or biblically, both in the Hebrew text and repeated by the words of Jesus, the essential purpose, I think, and the summary that Jesus gave is simply to love God and our neighbor as ourselves. Today, I'd like to reword that just a little bit for today and for myself. A purpose is to have, and I may be taking this from Albert Schweitzer, as he came here again 60, 70 years ago, to have a deep reverence for all of life and for all people. Reverence for life was his theme, and I think that's a purpose. And we can do that in a lot of different ways. Now, the word church is originally in the Greek, and that's where the title comes from. The word in Greek is simply ekklesia. And ekklesia does not quite mean church per se, but it simply means a gathering of people or assembly of citizens. Later, ekklesia was substituted for the Greek word kyriakon, which meaning the Lord's house. And kyriakon evolved into a Germanic kirka, and kirka then in English, the word church. It all starts with a gathering of people. I guess it's like the phrase of Jesus when he said, whenever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst. The word for gathering or assembly in Judaism, the same word would be kahal, and that's a concept of people gathering for important times and for important worship or significant passages of life that has been around for a long time. And way before that, primitive people essentially existed in tribes, as we understand. Human beings are inherently or instinctually social creatures. Human beings have always existed in various forms of community. We have always created cities. We live together. Now, I'm sure there are hermits that we don't know about them. There's always times that we've had separate times. But for the most part, we are social. We are living community. Furthermore, seeing how I brought up about the birds, the church for the birds, it seems that this is in the animal world as well. It's natural. For the most part, animals exist in herds and flocks as well. The church for the birds would probably not really exist with all the different species because I guess the old saying that birds of a feather flock together. Another dynamic, just kind of as an aside, is that many species of birds not only, now maybe, I'm sure you've noticed this, have not only flocked together, but they can simultaneously fly in synchronicity. It's quite a phenomenon when you see these birds, and all of a sudden a whole 100 birds can all fly, and they're all going in the same direction. How does that work? It's quite a phenomenon, and we watch 100 or more starlings, and they change. Now, and of course, small fish, or even large fish, can do the same thing. There's a name for this I just found out. And I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but it's called murmuration. Murmuration. I don't know where that came from, but that's what they call, this is a theory about murmuration in fish and birds, and it cannot be completely understood. They think that the brain is working so fast that they can move together within milliseconds of the other person, and some have called it mystical murmuration. But it's part of their instinct. That's just the illustration. And before you start thinking that this sermon is just for the birds so far, let me connect the dots by making the point that, again, we are creatures of instinctual communities. We as human beings are inherently social creatures, just like the animals, just like the birds. We exist in various communities, and we've always done so throughout all history and all cultures. Now, the temple or the church, Ekklesia, is just one form of this natural community. Now, the reason I'm talking about this today, because the fact of instinctual community has been so, I think, acutely demonstrated during this pandemic. My essential point, in spite of the fear of illness and death, it seems like, and I don't know if this is my own observations, almost like the majority of people have been most challenged to have to be isolated at home. The quarantine and stay-at-home orders were so antithetical to their natural need to reconnect with other human beings in any way that so many people were so challenged they couldn't do it any longer, and I'm going to guess, prematurely engaged in community associations. Now, even when, what's astounding to me as well is that even when people can connect now in this day and age over the phone and computer and Zoom, there still existed an acute need to be in the physical presence of other people. Social distancing seems to be an oxymoron for so many people. We are social people. We compulsively have a need to be with other people, even if they are strangers to us. We want to feel community whether we know others or not. Now, again, this is not to say we as individuals also like to have that downtime by ourselves as well, but is balanced with strong social interactions. Our local columnist here in the Aspen Times, Roger Marolt, talked about 4th of July in Aspen last month and how difficult it was without all the activities and people. He wrote right after the 4th of July, "I would have said that I don't like crowds. Now I miss them. I like people watching after all. The lack of crowds makes me realize how important acquaintances are. It makes me appreciate the comfort of seeing a familiar face I don't even know. I can see the undeniable feeling of hope in being in an electable, anonymous member of a resilient humanity that has persisted through every challenge history has put up against it so far. Strength in numbers. I suppose that describes it accurately enough. I'm not convinced we are not, I am convinced we are not designed to live in isolation. We need purpose with other people, even in recreation." Now, any excuse was utilized, Memorial Day and 4th of July, for example. The virus was continuing, in some states increasing, but people just had to congregate at the beach, in the park, at parties, bars, restaurants. I would also add that this need to reconnect with society, this is a little bit of a stretch here, was exhilarated with the George Floyd protest. I'm guessing that people were so pent up at home that the cause of protesting in public was heightened. There was now a purpose, a cause to get together with other people. Now, that combination is significant. There was, of course, a major need to reassociate with other people because of employment and the economy. We can easily understand the keen relationship between economic stability and community. I would ask, as a large portion of our economy based on community? There's an ad running in our local paper recently, Social Saturday in the Snowmass Mall. Then lists various activities, stores, and restaurants. Another ad reads, life struggles too much to handle on your own? You are not alone. We are here to help. This is from the Aspen Hope Center. Our library advertised a virtual community book club. Our chamber took out an ad which simply said, the chamber is community. Not only do we naturally yearn for social settings, but also when there's a bigger purpose to that community, it becomes even more enticing and enriched. This could apply to various forms of commerce, from shopping to eating, education, medicine, sports, entertainment, and yes, politics and religion. When there's something that's even a little bit greater than ourselves as an individual, and something that we want to watch, that if there's a great sporting event or a great musician or the music festival here or anything that's larger, that gives a bigger purpose than we can have just on our own. Everything involves community and was coupled with that greater purpose is most meaningful. Religion. I've had a professor teach me this and I've always remembered it. Religion is the vital fusion of myth and ritual in community. Now, these three components can really apply to just about any organization or group. Any endeavor involves a story or a truth, purpose or myth, identity through symbols, logos, and rituals. And we have a lot of rituals in just about every endeavor, and always within community. Myth is the meaning behind the event, the state, the organization. Myth is the meaning. The etymology of the word religion means to simply bind back to a source. And I'd like to add, to bind with one another. Community. One of the dynamics that I think has been acutely obvious to us during this pandemic is our need to exist within physical community is insatiable. Second, to be in community with a purpose or bigger picture than ourselves is a synergy which fulfills one of our most innate and instinctual desires, which is no less than our need for survival. Finally, these two truths are also part of the essential qualities of being a church or Ekklesia. This is still a given, I think, in this year of 2020. The next question is, given these two realities, how will a church adapt itself today to become relevant in the beginning of this third millennium? Given those first two major ingredients that have become, again, I think, so evident during this pandemic, how does the church today learn to provide the addition of ultimate meaning in the lives of these social and purposeful people? Now, everyone is looking for something to give meaning to their lives. Are they finding it in what they're doing? Are they finding it in various sources? Now, I think for the church, at least, and I would say any religious body, is to have, in this day and age, a bigger, broader, realistic, all-encompassing, all-inclusive, universal spirituality. Matthew Fox calls this a new revolution and a deeper ecumenism, as the Collect for Purity gained English translation and more usage after the Reformation. This 21st century could be another revolution for the church, and I hope it is. Matthew Fox, who spoke here not long ago, calls for a cosmic Christ that envelops all religions. He writes, and I think that cosmic Christ is quite the phrase, there is no such thing as a Christian sun and a Taoist moon and a Jewish ocean and a Buddhist forest. There's no such thing. When humanity learns this, we will have learned a way out of our anthropocentric dilemma that is boring our young, killing our souls, trivializing our worship, and exterminating the planet. Parker Palmer has a book entitled The Company of Strangers, Christians and the Renewal of America's Public Life. How can the church really affect people personally and socially? Now, I think there was one big example of this on TV last week. It was, and I watched, I think, all 3.5 or 4 hours on TV on the background when I was doing another thing. It was the John Lewis Memorial Service held on TV. Here you have a church, Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. And all these people are coming together to acknowledge this great man, John Lewis, who was a minister who incorporated his faith into improving the lives of people, all people, because everyone matters. Looking at everyone counts. And here you have this blending and this music of their faith, and 3 presidents and so many other people, Speaker of the House, all these people coming together. That's relevance. That's connection. That's being the church for the 21st century. I thought it was beautiful. Harvey Cox of Harvard writes in his book, The Future of Faith, that we have had the age of faith. We have gone a long time in the age of belief or orthodoxy with all the different denominations. Today, he says, we are entering a new age of the Spirit. Sort of like everyone's saying, I'm spiritual but not religious. The age of the Spirit. It could represent an integrated inter-spirituality that we've talked about so much in the past here. I could even be envisioned that we could have a church that will be made up, that actually could be made up of birds of different feathers and colors. The parrot, the pheasant, the sparrow, the starling, the goose, the cardinal, and the owl all can get together today. Birds of a feather may flock together, but they also do live in harmony with other kinds of birds, if you've noticed. So too can we learn to coexist in the new age of the Spirit. The world is getting smaller, and we have to learn to live and love each other in a much bigger community. There was another editorial I just saw early this morning saying there is only one race, the human race. I'm sure this is what Jesus taught us, and even what Moses had in mind as well. One of the primary purposes of the life of Jesus was to expand faith beyond one religion, from Judaism to all the Gentiles, which means non-Jewish. Jesus included all people. Everyone mattered. This truth needs to be realized in our modern world today. We can call this age the age of the cosmic Christ, which is not just Christian, but Christ in the Word and the Logos that exists in the beginning of all time and space. Matthew Fox states that this deep ecumenism is the movement that will unleash the wisdom of all world religions. This unleashing of wisdom holds the last hope for the survival of the planet we call home. And I just conclude by saying, may this little chapel in this broad, significant community in this country boldly profess this new age of spirit within our greater community and magnanimous purpose of a profound reverence for life and luminous love for all people. Amen, and thank you.